Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Claire, and hello to everyone. Thank you for bringing the weather with you this morning. I'm here to talk to you a little about some of the big challenges we face in our future economy. But before I do, I should explain why Jeremy, Angela, and me are actually here today. We have been deeply heartened by the number of people who have become part of the Labour movement in the Southwest region. You know, we have doubled our membership to over 30,000 members in the last year. And you're all part of that. And we're deeply honoured and proud that you do want to be part of that. And many of our long-standing members, when we were in the leadership and deputy leadership elections, particularly in this neck of the woods, have been telling us for some time that you want us to spend more of our time to work with you to organise communities, lead the discussions about how we have a fairer society, and we see that as a start of it. So in the audience today, we've got a big array of members, both old and new. And if you're a new member and this is your first event, I just want to say welcome. You've joined a great movement that is over a century old and millions strong. And if you're an older member, I'd want to say thanks for being with us in the good and the bad times, and please try and embrace our new members and let them know that they're welcome in our party. The three of us are totally committed to making your life in the Labour Party more welcoming and engaging, and we're also committed to making significant reforms to our digital platforms and the tools and digital tools to make it easier for you to go out and campaign, debate, engage and organise. So we're trying out a few new tech ideas today. And Carol, who organises these events, has told me that I have to tell you the first thing we're trying out is Wi-Fi. And if you want to register, if you want to get on the Wi-Fi network here, the Wi-Fi code is Labour Party. And it's all one word and no capitals, according to Carol, which allows you to tweet the events of the day. And that's the other thing I need to say. We are live streaming this event this morning. Now, to millions of people around the world, live streaming a political event is not a revolutionary act. But in the Labour Party, it's revolutionary. And so I want to say welcome to those people that are watching this event at home, and remind everyone, including Jeremy and Angela, that we are live all day. So it's really important we remember that, and we're not just talking to ourselves in the room. So welcome. We're all on a steep learning curve when it comes to technology. But one thing I do know, over the coming months, the Labour Party will be more accessible, not just on web platforms, but on mobile phones and tablets. And just to illustrate why this is our priority, can I just ask you all to hold up if you've got a smartphone, or put your hand up if you've hidden your smartphone. That's nearly everyone in this room. And that's really important, because the event that because what I'm also doing today, which is new for me, is showing you helpful slides that can be shared with our audience outside this room as well. And you'll see that nearly 2/3 of British adults currently have smartphones, and that is going up. So it's important that the Labour Party is accessible to people where they get their own information. And it's quite something, isn't it, when you think that what you were holding in your hands is more computer power than all of NASA had when they landed 2 men on the moon. Think about that for a moment. A handheld piece of kit that we use to check our emails, talk to our friends and families, listen to music and play games, hopefully in the future be used for voter ID and canvassing. And you've got more computational power than all the machines used for guiding crafts through outer space some 49 years ago. I knew that would happen. I did that deliberately. But in a funny sort of way, we take that computing power for granted because we don't focus on its power, but on its simplicity. And it's that simplicity that I think masks the huge changes ahead. We live in an era defined by technology. And I believe that for all of us in this room, we need to answer a profoundly important question. Do we make technology our enemy or our ally? The answer is going to be hugely important to the future of the Labour Party because the digital revolution has already transformed our world, but the automation revolution is going to turn it upside down. In the next 25 years, nearly everything will be automated. It will be the most profound change in industrial history. And how we deal with its impact is down to all of us. Last month, we celebrated the centenary of the birth of the great Harold Wilson, our most electorally successful Prime Minister. Harold defined the era of the jet age, forged in the white heat of technology. And just over 2 decades ago, I remember applauding Tony Blair at the Labour Party conference when he told us that every school would be connected to the information superhighway. Today, my children's generation no longer describe the internet as new technology. It isn't for them. It's just the internet. Or if you're my 10-year-old, it's the place where you download WWE wrestling videos and your dad pays for them. That combination of white heat engineering and massive computational power will make all our machines smarter. We're entering the second machine age, a new era of automation. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not the stuff of H.G. Wells. It's happening in Tunbridge Wells. And I remember growing up as a kid in Kidderminster in the West Midlands and marvelling that the British Leyland factory had built robots that could assemble cars. Well, today robots aren't just assembling cars. Robots are on the road driving them. In the budget last month, George Osborne announced plans to allow driverless cars and lorries on the UK roads for the first time. By 2020, nearly every car manufacturer will be making driverless cars. I was explaining this to Dennis Skinner. And Dennis was saying to me, I cannot possibly imagine a world where people do not drive cars, Tom. He said, but then again, I wouldn't have been able to imagine horseless carriages in 1890. I said, Dennis, nobody believes you were born in 1890. He said, and then he said something by way of an expletive and told me I was a cheeky scamp. But by the way, also, whilst we're on Osborne and the budget, John McDonnell has asked me to remind you of one thing. Can you believe that in the small print of that budget, George Osborne gave tried to give a £3,000 capital tax giveaway to 0.3% of the population by trying to take £3,000 from each of the hundreds of thousands of disabled people in this country. It's proof that Ian Duncan Smith was right for once in his life when he said that George Osborne was dividing, not uniting, our society. But back to the implications of driverless cars. They're likely to lead to greater efficiency on our existing road networks, a reduction in road deaths, improvements to delivery times in the freight sector, increased competition in the rail sector, but also a massive displacement of transport jobs. The policy outputs are endless, but it's jobs I want us to focus on today. The management consultants Deloitte have recently said that they believe there is a high probability that 11 million UK jobs are highly likely to disappear when the machines of tomorrow carry out the work done by humans today. Last year, the Bank of America predicted that nearly half of all manufacturing jobs would be lost to automation in the next decade, giving a staggering saving of $9 trillion in labour costs. And unlike in the past, with this wave of industrial change, it won't just be the sectors traditionally held by skilled workers working with their hands that will be affected. The professions will be hit just as hard as traditional manufacturing jobs. Richard and Daniel Susskind argue that it's the traditional professions that will bear the immediate impact in the rise of automated systems. Doctors, lawyers, pharmacists, engineers, academics and managers. Why pay an accountant when a computer software can do your tax return as quickly and as cheaply or cheaper? The Financial Times recently announced that 100,000 legal jobs will disappear as similar technology is introduced in the legal industry. 100,000 fewer lawyers in the United Kingdom. So it's not all bad. That's a joke, by the way, for those of you that are lawyers. That's a joke for those of you that are watching at home. But to understand the scale of things to come, I think we have to learn from our past. When the Industrial Revolution unleashed the stunning power of capitalism with the sheer productive force of industrialization, society was changed forever. The Industrial Revolution shaped our country from the railways that brought people closer together to our great cities with their town halls, libraries, galleries, museums and statues. That wave of industrial change created great wealth, great philanthropy, and great advances in the human condition. But it also created upheaval, vast misery, child labour, infectious disease, industrial injury, fetid slums, infant mortality, children growing up without seeing the sun. You can still see elements of that today in the streets of cities in Vietnam or Brazil. It took an amalgam of municipal leadership, business philanthropy, and the collective strength of workers to civilise the new economic landscape shaped by technological advance. Those forces were so instrumental in the development of our trade unions, and at the turn of the century, our own party, created to represent the interests of working people. As a country, we will need to forge a similar alliance to address some of the inequalities that digitisation and automation is already creating. We need government, workers, employers, and enlightened entrepreneurs to work in partnership to ensure that everyone gains from the benefits these changes will bring. And that's why, despite these powerful forces bearing down on us all, and all those media attacks you have to read every day, that's why I'm optimistic about the future of our party. Because history also shows that only the Labour Party can bring people through these difficult and turbulent times. Because it's only the Labour Party that believes in harnessing the power of the enabling state. In the world of Sajid Javid and George Osborne, government is an impediment to market perfection. Their ideology dictates that the market alone must decide who wins and who loses. That is not the Labour way. We are all here today because we believe that work should be rewarded. And unlike the Tories, we believe that there is a distinction between the interests of business and the interests of capital. Enterprise and hard work grow businesses that become employers and contribute to the fabric of society in many ways, social and cultural, as well as through taxation. And why we all joined the Labour Party was because we think that government should work to support businesses and workers that create prosperity that can be shared by the many. Capital is a necessary element of economic activity, But slavish devotion to the recreation of money for money's sake will lead to a very dislocated and dysfunctional society when automated systems are doing much more of the work and creating much more of the wealth. Our challenge in the next decades of automation will be to work out how we continue to grow our economy, but ensure that the value created and time saved by automated systems is shared more fairly and not used to further enrich an already wealthy and powerful elite. Just look at the figures on the screens now. When you're faced with such stark inequality, where 1% of the global population own 50% of the global wealth, or 50% of the or the 50% of the population that own just 1% of the world, I know there's one thing we can't do. You can't just leave that economic trajectory to fate. That's what Sajid Javid wants to do with the steel industry. It's not sensible. It's not fair. It's also not in our country's national interest to do that. Sajid Javid would like steel workers to think that he is powerless to act. He wraps his powerlessness up in an economic and political libertarianism and hopes for the best. His Tory colleagues eschew any role for government, reject any notion of an industrial strategy that might help a strategically vital industry through tough times. Well, Angela and John McDonnell have a very different plan for the steel industry that will help protect 40,000 workers that are facing a very uncertain future. And if we don't act to shape our future economy, the graph showing how much wealth is in the hands of so few will just continue to grow. Just take a look at the tech companies. One of their successes has been to concentrate greater wealth in fewer hands. And although the benefits they bring to consumers are enormous, the social dividend we receive from many of these firms is not as great as it should be. Let's just take a look at jobs. When Instagram, the photo sharing website, was sold to Facebook with a huge market capitalization of $1 billion, it was reported that it only employed 13 people. Twitter has a global workforce of more than that, 4,000, in 35 offices across the world, and a market value of 10 billion. But if you compare that to a more traditional company, Ford, which is worth 50 billion, it employs 200,000 workers worldwide. In other words, Ford doesn't just make cars, they also make jobs. And when Tony Blair made those predictions 20 years ago, we couldn't possibly begin to imagine the impact of the information superhighway. Yet that golden age of the knowledge economy has not yielded all that it promised. The effect of those big tech platforms has not just been to take out many jobs from the economy. We've seen huge amounts of cash going on their balance sheets with very little investment in social infrastructure, education, skills and health. And incidentally, if you want another argument for staying in the European Union, then do take a look at Google. When the European Commission took them on for abusing their dominant market position, Google had to change what it did. Well, when they are pulling in $19 billion a quarter, even the finest UK Treasury lawyers would find it hard to take on the might of this transnational gorilla alone. That's one of the reasons we need a European Union. And as these digital industries dissect jobs into their task-based elements, no wonder Hillary Clinton has warned of the threat of the gig economy. Just look at the Uber effect in London. Uber is a technology platform that makes it simple to book a cab. It's cheaper. But they've done this by delegating risks and driving down the pay of drivers who are poorly unionised and dependent on being allowed to remain on the Uber platform for their livelihoods. Our colleagues in the trade union movement are taking steps to address that. But the rise of the so-called gig economy will create armies of new workers, and none of them will have the collective bargaining power that previous generations of workers fought so hard to win. That has huge implications for our economy and for our movement. Uber, Facebook, Google, and the other successful tech platforms have brought immense gains to the lives of millions of people, but they are part of an emerging winner-takes-all economy. And if you don't believe me on that, take a look at the recent words of the most famous investment manager in the world, Warren Buffett, who said, "Productivity gains achieved in recent years have largely benefited the wealthy. Gains frequently cause upheaval. Both capital and labour pay a terrible price when innovation or new efficiencies upend the world." And in his recent letter to investors, Mr. Buffett said, "The solution is a variety of safety nets aimed at providing a decent life for those who are willing to work but find their specific talents judged of small value because of market forces." Well, if you have trouble believing Jeremy Corbyn when he says we need a fairer society, listen to Warren Buffett. His point is that the wealthy can absorb the changes innovation brings, but those at the bottom of the income scale rarely can. They need government to help them. And that's why we're delighted we've got Scott Courtney here today. Scott is a great campaigner and is going to talk to us about the magnificent campaign he's been running in the States to get low-paid workers a decent minimum wage. We already live in a world in which a greater proportion of the wealth is held by a smaller number of people than at any time since the 1920s. Automation is going to exacerbate that. The forces of globalization and automation are leaving our society's labour market looking increasingly like an hourglass, with room at the top with those with existing wealth or access to capital, and a widening flat base of lower paid jobs that cannot be automated, and a hollowing out in the middle, the jobs in retail or high street banking, for example. Do we really want to live in a society of affluent leaders, struggling workers, with little room in the middle and fewer chances for movement? No wonder someone said to me that when we have our debate on the European referendum, we should say to those people that are worried about immigration that it's not Romanians taking our jobs you should fear, it's the robots. And before you think I'm being anti-technology, I'm not. What's not to like about books, food, and clothes being delivered to your door, or getting access to every piece of music and film ever recorded available to stream in your living room, or our kids having access to the most comprehensive encyclopedia that ever existed at their fingertips? When Harold Wilson gave a second educational chance to workers through the creation of the Open University, he wasn't to know he would change the lives of millions. 1.89 million people have been through the OU. Yet last year alone, it is estimated that 35 million people signed up to one of the many massive online open courses provided by the global university sector. It goes to show that if we make technology our ally, we can change the life chances of millions. Now, Aiko, the robot receptionist, shows us how much our world is about to change. My argument this morning is that it's only our party, with our belief in partnership and the enabling state, that can forge a new industrial strategy, fit for the age of automation, fit for the epoch of drones, robots, and automated systems. We're going to have to take head on that hourglass economy, the future of work, and the need to spread prosperity and not concentrate it in fewer hands. And that's why we're all here today, to shape the future. Hope you have a good day.